Okay, hello everyone. My name is Eric Maslowski, and in this tutorial we're going to be continuing the organic modeling series by just taking a look at how we can use primitives to speed up or add some additional geometry to our object. We're also going to just take a really quick look at how we can approach the back of the head and the neck area. So, to get started, let's open up the scene that comes with this tutorial. And you'll see we basically just have our face with a little bit more here on the side. Now, again, whenever approaching these sort of things, it's often good to plan out a little bit. So if we jump on over to Photoshop and our reference guides, remember again we want to just create a really quick idea of how the topology flows. So again, use the wrinkles as a reference. So here, got a nice line going down. It gets a little bit harder with the side of the head here. But basically just continue to go through here and just define some key lines. Next, what we're going to end up doing is, again, we're going to draw in some basic topology lines. Now we're going to do this very simply because, we just want a rough idea. We're going to be using other methods than the spline method to actually add this detail, so it doesn't have to be perfectly precise. So in this case, again, we just start off by tracing our existing lines. Now, this right over here is the shoulder. So what we often want to do is we often want to bring lines going out through the shoulder. And so we can bring this up in front. Also, when you're setting these up, you often want to kind of isolate the ear. So let's jump ahead to where I have some cleaner lines and this all laid out. Okay, so these are the lines that we've got here. And in this case, if we take a closer look at what's actually present, we can see that we have one going underneath the jaw, pretty much up in front of the ear. We have another one going right behind the ear, creating a nice isolation of the ear so that we can add it at a later time. We also have these in the back, isolating the various folds of fat in the back, and then just basically breaking up the head a little bit. Okay, so let's save this, bring it into Max, and assign it to our reference planes. Okay, there we go. We now have the new image in 3D Studio Max. And what we want to do here is, first off, if you had trouble locating the reference planes, you can go over to Display, and I believe it was initially set to hide frozen objects. So we just uncheck that, and it brings back our reference planes. Okay, so now what we want to do is we actually want to just try to take a sphere and see if we can use part of its geometry to build up part of the head here. Now, sometimes this method doesn't really pay off, other times it's a huge time saver. So once you start playing with this method a little bit, you'll get more comfortable and be able to spot the benefits before you actually commit to it. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we just want to create a nice sphere in our scene. Next, we want to turn on edges by hitting F4 on the keyboard. Alright, so we can see how they're all lined up. And we want to do this in our main views. Next, we want to roughly position it over our head. We can press Alt-X to make it semi-transparent so we can see it a little bit better. Then the next thing that we want to do is we want to orient the poles so that they're coming out of the sides. We're not going to be using these poles for our geometry, because if we take a close look at them, look at how many triangles there are. It's just a big mess. So we're just going to take this and rotate it 90 degrees. Alright. And then next we're going to just scale our object. Squash it down a little bit. Okay, good. Alright, so now that we have a basic sphere in place, the next thing that we want to do is we want to take a closer look at the geometry and how it matches up with the existing geometry. So we want to start matching up edges. So we can count here, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, possibly 5 that we want across the top here. So we just start decreasing our count here until we have a nice number. Okay, so in this case it's 24 segments. Now, the next step in this is we need to get rid of the geometry that we aren't going to actually be using. So if we apply an Edit Poly modifier, go to the polygon mode, make sure that we're in crossing mode in that window, and then turn on our paint selection marquee if it's not already done so. Hold down Control on the keyboard and then just start painting away. Now we don't want all of these interior ones. Okay, they're just too small and they're going to just cause us more problems than they're worth. And we also only want kind of like the back of the head. Okay, so once we have all these selected, just hit delete on your keyboard. We're now going to go into our front view and select all of the faces on the right hand side. Now the reason why we're doing this is because our face is currently set up for symmetry. So when we go and we attach this head to our face, if we don't remove the right hand side, we're going to get all kinds of duplicate polygons that we don't need. So if we change our mode back to marquee, or a rectangular marquee, go back to face mode, click and drag, and delete. Okay, so there we have a bunch of polygons already set up for us, really nice and evenly spaced. And now all we need to do is we just need to start to line this up. So, go to vertex mode, turn on snap. Again, we want to configure our snap option just to make sure that it's correct. So we right click on the snap option, make sure it's at the vertex and nothing else. And now we just go to our move tool and just click and drag our various points around. And at this point we want to just line up the closest ones first, and we're going to actually turn on soft selection so that when we move these last few, the effect tapers off across the head. So we don't just have, for example, if we just take this bottom one, drag it up, you can see what kind of effect we have. We have a very sharp turn in. So it's not exactly what we want in this case. Okay, so on the right hand side, underneath the soft selection tab, we turn it on and we take a quick look just to see how this is. It's not that bad. Okay, it's moving a bunch of them out. You can see what it did to all of these, and actually we're going to keep that. However, if you're using this method and you need a little bit more control, you can always mess with the various fall-off values so that's a little bit more isolated, or you can also adjust the curve right down here. Okay, so now that we have this bottom one lined up, we're going to turn off soft selection and then just resume lining up these other ones. There we go, and there we go. Get these back just to make sure that they're right in line. Okay, then we press Alt-X to get our surface back. And then we got the beginnings of the back of our head. We can either now start copying these faces and start building it up more and more by, say, selecting these at the bottom, going into our left view, holding down Shift and moving the objects or moving the edges, so this will create a nice copy. And we can just use our existing guide as an idea of how the polygons need to flow. Now once we have this entire geometry set up, we can then go through and attach it to our head. So let's jump ahead to where all this is modeled out. Okay, I actually want to show you one more thing before we bring out the full head, and that's how to simplify this. Okay, we already simplified it a little bit, the number of segments and everything, to get it to match the front of the head or the forehead. But if we take a look at the side here, this is a lot of geometry to work with. Alright, and so it could be pretty difficult to get a nice curvature out of this because there are so many points. So often when working with large, smooth, or sweeping areas, we want to just have the fewest amount of polygons possible and let the smoothing algorithm or the subdividing algorithm do most of the work for us. So a quick way of simplifying this geometry is, let's go ahead and hide our reference planes. Don't really need them right now. Go back to our sphere, make sure it's selected, go to edge mode. And if we go through and we just select every other little edge there, okay? So we just have a few of them selected, and this will cut our number of faces here in half. So we have all these selected. Then on the right hand side underneath selection, we click on ring. And what ring does is it basically selects the edges that are parallel to the ones that you currently have selected. In other options, you may be able to actually use loop, which will try to select all of the ones that are kind of like connecting or flowing from your current. And so you need to make sure that for loop, there you go. So let's select those faces again. Click on ring. And then underneath edit geometry, just going to click on collapse. So there we go, a much simpler form. It'll be a lot easier to modify and extend, and yet we still keep our nice clean shape. Okay, so now I'm going to bring out the finished back of head, and so unhide all. Okay, so there we go. Now I didn't keep the complete smooth here because we wanted to have little dents and changes in the surface of the head here. I also brought out the jugular here, as well as the collarbone at the bottom. Alright, so now let's just go ahead and attach this object to our face so that we can see it on both sides and make any final adjustments. So if we select our face, drop down to Edit Poly underneath our Symmetry, Smooth, and Turbo Smooth, and underneath Edit Geometry there's the Attach and the Attach Settings buttons. If we click on Attach, then we just basically click on the object we want to make part of our current one. Otherwise, we can click on the Settings option and get a picker. And so, want back of head. And there we go. We're now attached. This is very similar to when we were using the splines and attaching them together. Now, much like that, we need to test to make sure that all of our edges, or all of our vertices, are one. So we're going to go to our Paint option, make sure we're in crossing mode, and then just go ahead and select several of the vertices. On the right hand side underneath Edit Vertices, click on the Settings box next to Weld, and it's already set up pretty good, down to 419. We can now just give these a quick test. Okay, so it looks pretty good. Okay, then when we jump back up to the top of our stack, we can see it on both sides. We can turn on Turbo Smooth, and there we go. We have the back of the head. Okay. Now, one final thing to keep in mind, it was mentioned earlier, but you want to make sure that you have a nice area that separates the ear. Because the ear is a very complex shape, and so we're going to be modeling that separately and then stitching it to the head, much like how we modeled the back of the head separately and stitched it to the face. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to email me or post on the forums, and thanks for watching. Cheers.